Hi again then guys, and welcome to a brand new review series to replace Gives You Wings, the Red Bull series from last week. This series is, as you'll have seen from the title, Visions of Tomorrow, and as the name gives a pretty strong hint for, this is a review series for each and every Vision Gran Turismo concept car that we have on GT6. Now this series may span over to GT7 or GT Sport, depending on how those games pan out. But for now, of course, this is covering GT6. And at some point this series will have to end and be replaced, because obviously we're not going to have all of the Vision GT cars released in the time that it takes to cover this series. So this will be a series kind of like Spirit of Le Mans, which will be revisited once new vehicles are added. We're not running in chronological order, we're running in a random order considering the different vehicles. And in this first episode we're considering what is pretty much my personal favourite Vision GT car of them all, the Aston Martin DP-100. As good a place as any to start this series off, and it's a pretty brilliant all-round car. Semi-underappreciated, I would say. You don't see a massive amount of people utilising this Vision GT machine. It tends to be one of those cars which people think, oh yeah, that's a really nice car, but then you never really use it again. You use it occasionally for cruising, maybe for the occasional race, maybe even for a top speed race on Special Stage Route X once in a while. But like many of the Vision GT cars, it can't really compete with many of the existing cars because of how limited its range of tuning and especially upgrades are. Now that said, what does this Aston have to offer for those who don't perhaps own it yet? Well, like many of the other Vision GTs, it costs 1 million credits, which means it's cheaper than a 177. That's a pretty good start considering how cool the car is. Visually, I would say this is a fantastic looking car. I've mentioned before on the channel what I think this car looks like. To me, the front end just looks like pure Ford GT90. And the back end really reminds me of the Jaguar CX-75, both of which are awesome, and funnily enough, neither of which reached production. In terms of spec though, this car has a lot to offer, and in many ways it's actually a completely unique Aston Martin compared to their production models. For a start, it's mid-engined, which is unheard of for Aston Martin production cars. It's also all-wheel drive, which is rare, if not the first time seen on an Aston Martin. I'm not aware off the top of my head of any other Aston Martin that has featured all-wheel drive from the factory. There may well be one, but I can't think of what it may be. In terms of the engine, it's running a 6-litre V12, which is turbocharged to produce 839 horsepower with an oil change. So it is one of the more powerful Vision GT models. It also puts out a very respectable and surprisingly high for a V12 813 pound-feet of torque, which is very, very impressive. Now, it's not quite as lightweight as you might hope. It weighs 1,375 kilos. But considering that that is with no weight loss package, that's not too bad. That means it's a little bit lighter than, say, a Super Saloon. So not too bad, not particularly amazing in terms of weight, but certainly nothing wrong with that. In terms of horsepower per tonne, it puts out 610. It's not higher, of course, because of that little bit of extra weight that it's carrying compared to some other supercars. And the PP is a reasonably high 657, which is actually slightly higher than a Tommy Kaira ZZ2, which we, of course, reviewed earlier on in the week. So how does this car compare directly to the other Vision GTs, but also to the other supercars in the game and potentially even racing cars? Well, against the other Vision GTs, I would say it's one of the best. And the reason for that is not just because I like the car, it's due to the fact that this can actually genuinely be tuned. It has a tunable gearbox, tunable suspension, tunable differential, you can increase the power, etc. Very few Vision GT cars these days actually have tunable spec, which is why I'm personally disappointed with so many of them. This car, though, can be personalised to the driver, and that makes it much more of a track weapon than many of its opposition and many of its rivals. What about in terms of performance, though? Well, there's no NOS, unfortunately, and as we said, 839 horsepower. With 839 horsepower, it's going to be a quick car. All-wheel drive means it can launch pretty well. It has an 8-speed gearbox as standard, which reduces to a 7 if you fit the race box, and the top speed can be worked to be around 260, which is very good for a Vision GT. That makes it on par with, say, the Subaru Vision GT or even the Chaparral Vision GT, although obviously it doesn't get there quite as quickly as the Chaparral. Overall, I would say the biggest advantage of this car is how good it is all round. It looks fantastic, it has a very strong top speed for a VGT car, good acceleration, great grip. The handling is very good due to the mid-engine all-wheel drive layout, and for 1 million credits, it's actually better than some supercars. So, that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.